Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I thought I'd do something kind of that has a feature to it. I'm going to make kind of a little snake ring, but it's going to have a triple spinner in the middle, so hopefully it'll come out cool. We'll see how it turns out, but let's give it a try. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. Most of them have some interesting and useful information about metalsmithing on the backs. This one has flow temperatures of various types of solder. There's also some with conversion charts from gauge to inches to millimeters and things like that. Pretty useful information that you use all the time. So I like to keep track of the projects I'm working on in the book so that I can go back and see them again in the future. That way I have a permanent record of what I've made, and it makes it easier to reproduce that if I wanted to, or just remember how I did it since I've done so many things anymore. So I went through a couple of iterations today. I wanted to do something with a snake. I was going to do a bracelet. I thought about doing one of these drapey kind of snake pendants you see occasionally. I think that would be a fun project at some point. Ultimately, at my wife's suggestion, she likes this triple spinner ring that I have, and she came up with the idea of adding a tail and a head to one of these, as well as having a textured body for the little wraps of the snake going around your finger, and you'll be able to spin them, so that should be fun. I've picked out a pretty faceted tourmaline that's about 5 by 10 millimeters. Here's our little green tourmaline. So it's not a perfect tourmaline. It's got some color zoning in it. It's a little bit dark on the front side, but we're going to put it as the head of our snake, I think, like this. So it'll be facing upwards like that, and then we'll have a tail over here too. So just to kind of give you a stylized impression of a snake where the coils spin. This is going to be about 9 or 10 gauge. I rolled some 8 gauge half round through my rolling mill to reduce it just a little bit. I have this stamp that I produce a texture on things sometimes with. It's kind of a little asterisk looking stamp, and it makes for a really nice looking pattern on things. So we'll stamp those rings before we put them on the spinner thing, and then we'll have everything get it all put together. So the outside edge is probably going to be 16 gauge square, or 14 if I can't find any 16. I have a little piece here, but it's all beat up, so we'll see if there's any left laying around. If not, I'll have to make some probably. 16 gauge is 1.3 millimeters, 14 gauge is 1.6, so I'll probably go for the smaller if I can find some. Or if I have enough motivation, I'll make it out of some 14 by pulling it through a drop plate until it's the right size. The inside band that this is all going to spin around is going to be just thin sheet 26 gauge, which is 0.41 millimeters. And these pieces here will just be some more of the same stock that I taper down. The bezel is going to be 26 gauge fine silver bezel strip in 4.76 millimeters height, or 3/16 of an inch, I believe that is. And I'll probably have to cut it down. I'll make a little step on the inside of it out of some 18 gauge round wire, which is 1 millimeter. So that's my plan, and I think let's make the setting for the stone first, and we'll go from there. It's tempting when you have a pointy stone like this, if you're making a bezel for it, to end the bezel where you're going to solder it together right at that point. That's almost never a good idea, because it's going to create a situation where it's harder to bend right there, and that's already a spot it's difficult to push over the tip of the stone when you're setting it. So we're going to make a sharp bend like that, and then we'll have the solder joint somewhere along the side there. So we'll try and get this as pinched close as we can. You got to be a little careful with marquees and teardrop shapes like this, because the tip is pretty easy to break off on stuff like this sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and cut it there, and we'll see how close we are after we solder it. If you're new to my channel, here's some information about my torch and my solder and my flux and everything. Let's get this soldered. I have a few pieces of hard silver sheet solder floating around here. I'll just use one of those. It never takes very long to get bezel soldered. I think we got that pretty close on the nose there, so that's good. Now we need to create a little step on the inside of the bezel. I'll file the top and bottom a little bit, but we'll build up a step with a couple of layers of 18 gauge round wire. It's not the only way to do a step bezel, but it's a pretty easy one that I use a lot. Let's cut that off. And let's evaluate how close we are in size. We can always continue to snip more off. Actually, that's pretty good. So I'm going to make at least one more because this is a deep stone and we don't want that pavilion sticking out the bottom. Okay, I've got 3 layers in there. I made sure they're relatively flat. You don't want to have them wavy. And I like to, where did my solder go that I just cut? Oh, there it is right here. I cut a few big pieces of hard silver sheet solder. The easiest way to solder these rings on the inside is to set the whole thing on top of some pieces of solder. So we'll get it fluxed and do that. Alright, we got a pretty smooth bottom there. Let's see how high our stone sits. We're probably going to have to cut the seat down inside of this just a little bit, but it's close. So I'll use a ball burr to lower that when it's getting close to the time to set the stone, but that fits nicely and it looks pretty good. This is a piece of that 9 gauge round wire. And we need a little bit of it attached to that head there, so I'm going to solder a short piece of this to the back side of this bezel, and that'll be how our head attaches to the band. So you can just kind of set this up against there. I curved the end just a little bit with a file so it would seat up against there a little more nicely. Push him up there. I'm going to do something called pick soldering here. It's probably the most valuable metalsmithing skill that I learned over the years. And that's how you pick up a little bit of solder on one of these titanium picks. You can also use tungsten. And then when we get to the flow temperature of the metal, we're pretty close, we just kind of put that down in there where we want it to go. And if we have the temperature right, it should just jump right on there. Now I jumped the gun a little bit on that one, but if you time it just right, it just pops right over there. And it allows you to place solder really precisely. which is really handy in a lot of situations. So, I measured this to be about a size 8 to 8.5, somewhere in there. And in order to do this, we need to cut ourselves a piece of sheet, and we need to consider how wide it needs to be as well as how long. This is how long it needs to be for the inside part of the ring to be about an 8.5. So we're going to cut a piece of this 26 gauge sterling sheet. I already marked it there, but we need to figure out about how wide it needs to be. So it needs to be wide enough to fit 3 of these, plus a lip on either side. It's going to have to be there. And then I'm going to leave some extra for good measure so we have some to work with. So it ended up being about, I don't know what happened to my little ruler I always use. Actually, we can just do it this way if we want. So from this edge out to this line here, it's about 12.3 millimeters maybe. That should get us pretty close. So let's cut that out, and I need to solder a piece of that square wire on the edge here. It will be our first step. Okay, I'll get this all filed up. First, I'll get it kind of flattened out. Okay, let me see if I can find some of that square wire and the 16 gauge. I'll be right back. So I'm going to pick a little solder on here because one of the things you want to make sure to do if you're doing a spinner with borders on it like this is I don't want to have a lot of slop solder going elsewhere, so I'm going to try and keep it contained on this piece, and I'm just going to pre-melt a little bit on the one side of this, and hopefully it'll spread along the way. So I have a few little pieces there, and then we can stick it down right on the edge of that thing. Okay, let's see if we can get this. Sometimes you can use the flux to kind of like hold it in place when you position it. So the trick on this is the wire's already got the solder stuck to it. We need to get the solder stuck to the sheet too. So ideally we want it to get up to that soldering temperature. That looks pretty good. I have a seam all the way down. Let's file that flush. Should be able to kind of snip these off and then file them flush with the ends. Okay, and the next step I think I'll do is I'll make this round. Solder those two ends together. I usually solder these on the inside to prevent having a lot of excess solder on the surface where the rings are going to be spinning from making a spinner like this. You want to get that as smooth as possible so you don't have any bumps. And let's solder it on the inside this time. So let's cut some more solder. Okay, there's usually a little excess solder on the inside. I'll just kind of file some of that out of there. Once I have it rounded out, I usually take my file and remove any kind of debris that's left on there. Alright, now let me find that half round wire. It might be easier to hammer if we have three separate pieces. When I hammer this, it's probably going to stretch it a little bit, spread it out a little bit, so it's okay if it's a little bit too long. We'll just cut it down to the right size afterwards. Okay, and that leaves us hopefully plenty of room there to put that extra edge on the other side. I'm kind of mumbling tonight. I need to speak up a little bit, Chad. So I'm just going to start on the end and work my way down. Yeah, it produces kind of a nice snaky sort of texture, I think. Let's see how much that stretched this out. 3/16 of an inch, maybe. Okay, before we shape these gotten work hardened by doing that. So let's anneal them. Then we can kind of figure out how long to cut them. In order to get this as round as I possibly can, I'm going to do it on the ring mandrel like this and overlap them. So I want to get the size pretty close. what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it pretty exact. And then once we get it soldered, we can stretch it out if it's still too tight, just a tiny bit. These are pretty easy to stretch on a ring manual. Like on the other one, I'm going to remove the excess solder that's on the inside. That's almost perfect because I want it to be tight, so I have to stretch it just a tiny bit. Let's see if these ones are maintain the same kind of situation. Pretty close. Yeah, that's just about right. So, and that one's just shy of 12. So we can stretch these other ones to be about the same. Okay, so one thing I need to do is I need to solder my snake head on here. Kind of want to solder that on like that. Cut this pretty exact because I want it to be snug when I push it on there. So up until now I've used hard silver solder on everything, and this is the last one where I'm going to be able to do that probably. To solder on that this last ring onto here without inadvertently soldering any of these other pieces, I'm going to use maybe some easy paste solder just on the outer edge here. But before I do that, I'm going to let these all pickle for a while. And I may actually do it in the morning, so we'll have to see. But let's throw these all in the pickle and see how it works. So everything's kind of pickled up and cleaned up a bit, and I got everything lined up, and I put a little bit of easy paste solder on the very top edge here. This is kind of the sketchiest part of the whole operation. Well, let's see what we did here. Everything's still moving, and that's a good sign. Well, I'll do some further cleanup here and get this pickled, and then we can get it polished and set the stone. We'll see how it looks. Alright, I'll get that cleaned up and we'll see how it goes. Alright, got everything polished up. Yeah, all of my rings are spinning. And we just need to add the stone. So I did cut it down a little bit on the inside with a ball burr to make this sit a little deeper. And I do this a little differently than some, but I use my chain nose pliers, flat side here, as my bezel pusher. Once you get it kind of pushed down, then you can use the smooth outer part as a burnishing tool. Like I said, this is how I do it, but everybody does this a little differently. It's okay if you want to use a regular bezel pusher and burnisher. Once I'm done here, I'll probably take one of those blue fine polishing wheels, silicone polishing wheels on my rotary tool, and just smooth out the top of that a little bit. And I think we'll call it good. There's my snaky ring. Some good rotation for his little coils. He's coiling around your finger. This is a little bit sharp. I may smooth that down just a skosh. I don't want people poking themselves, so we'll make his tail not quite as sharp. Alright, I'll smooth that out with a Dremel a little bit, and we'll call it good. I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you would have done differently. I always like to hear people's ideas. Alright. Okay, well that was the triple spinner snake ring. I hope you enjoyed that one and found some useful content there. If you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button before you go, or maybe even hype my video. All of that stuff really helps me a lot, and I do appreciate it. I'd also like it if you'd go visit my main channel page and check out some of my other videos. I have 630 plus videos, if I remember right. So there's quite a bit of content there. I do 3 per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. So There's a constant stream of good content coming out for all different skill levels, I think. So if you're just looking for a project, there's lots of projects there. If you're looking for a particular skill, I think you'll find quite a bit of information there for that as well. So check it out, subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Before we go, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. They are awesome. I had a live stream with them this morning, and it was a great deal of fun. I get to meet people all over the world, and it's a nice artistic place with a lot of cool people. So thanks for making it that way, you guys. Thank you also for your financial help. The other group are my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 28,600, I believe. That's amazing. I really truly love your input on my videos, the constructive criticism, the telling me how you do things or suggestions for videos. All of that kind of stuff helps me out a great deal, and I appreciate the time that it takes for you to leave those comments, so thank you for that. Thanks also for your contribution financially, the buy me a coffees, the super thanks, the purchases from my shop, the purchases of my ebooks. All of that stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your help. The video description down below has links not only to Patreon, if you want to check that out. It has links to my merch store, so you can get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other merch. There's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's tutorials. Each page in the book has a lot of extra information about each individual tutorial I did during 2025, as well as a link right to the tutorial. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a really nice way to support my channel. You can even get a package deal where you get all 3 of the years I've done that for so far, 2023, 2024, and 2025, and you get $15 off if you buy all 3 at the same time. So, thanks for coming today. Thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.